At 63, you learn the difference between a life and a schedule. A schedule is what men in offices keep. A life is what you do when nobody is watching, and nobody much cares if you do it right. My life starts before light. First axbite goes into cedar kindling while the stars are still cold and hard over black elk drainage. I stack split sticks by touch, not sight, because 9 winters in the same cabin teach your hands the map better than your eyes. Then I check the rabbit snares along the creek, a loop here, a bent willow there, tracks in the mud telling me what passed while I slept. If the snares are empty, I reset and move on. If they're sprung, I thank the rabbit under my breath and get practical. 2 steel cans from the spring come next. Uphill with one in each hand reminds me exactly how old I am and exactly how much older I'd be if I sat around feeling sorry for myself. After that, coffee on the porch rail in Lila's mug. The mug is chipped on one side. Faded yellow with a blue ring, she always said, looked like Saturn. She died 9 winters ago in 6 weeks flat. Diagnosis, treatments, then gone before I learned how to stand in a room without listening for her footsteps. Cancer can be mean and quick at the same time. I didn't know that until it moved into my house. I kept the mug because it was there the morning she told me not to turn feral and start arguing with squirrels. I do argue with squirrels now and then. I just don't mention it to anyone. From the porch, I log elk movement with binoculars and a grease pencil in a weather notebook. Herd sizes, direction of travel, time of day, wind. Folks in town read news on their phones. I read ridgelines and game trails. More reliable, less shouting. The drainage gives up its patterns if you watch long enough. That's why the county still calls me. Retired Army Pathfinder sounds dramatic if you put it on paper, but the work was always the same. Read sign, read terrain, read people, and don't guess when guessing gets somebody hurt. Out here it translates clean. Cougar takes 3 calves on a lower pasture. They call Bo. Family from Eugene hikes past dark with 1 bottle of water and no map. They call Bo. Deputy finds tracks he can't place. He sends photos and asks if I'm busy. I'm mostly never busy in the way they mean. Busy would imply urgency. My ridge runs on patience. Late October, rain came in sideways for 3 days and stripped half the gold off the big leaf maples. My well pump started making a dry, metallic cough every time I primed it. I ignored it for a week, then a second week, because old machinery and old men both get louder before they quit. 3rd week, it dropped pressure to a trickle that would have embarrassed a garden hose. I pulled the housing and saw rust where there should have been smooth steel. Replacement costs sat in my head like a toothache. More than I had free, less than enough to panic, exactly enough to make me take work I'd usually pass on. The call came while I was skinning a rabbit under the eave. Bo, it's Sheriff Dalton. His voice had that careful, neutral tone men use when they're about to ask for trouble and call it a favor. You heard about the prince by the larch spur? I heard Facebook heard about prince by the larch spur. He exhaled, almost laughed. Yeah, that. Timber Consortium's got survey crews delayed. Rumor mill says Sasquatch corridor, sacred migration lane, state cover-up. Pick your flavor. They want someone credible to assess and put it to bed. Credible means old and stubborn. It means people trust your sign reading. Contract is short, 2 days, maybe 3. Good pay. I looked at the pump parts spread on my table, then at Lila's mug upside down on the drying rack. How good. He named a number that would buy a pump, fittings, and maybe enough diesel to keep me through November if I was careful. What's your office need from me? I asked. Find the source, document. If it's a hoax, say hoax. If it's bear, say bear. If it's pranksters with carved feet, say that and we'll move on. If it's not, I thought, but didn't say. Email me scope and liability, I said. I'll look. By dusk, I had the paperwork printed and signed, stuffed in a zip bag and reread with the same suspicion I reserve for used chainsaws and politicians. The consortium language was all public confidence and operational continuity. Sheriff's addendum focused on safety and evidence handling. Nobody put the word Bigfoot in writing. Smart lawyers, nervous foresters. Most fake prints fail in the first 10 minutes. Folks make them too clean, too dramatic, too consistent. Real tracks, human, bear, elk, whatever, are messy with context. Weight shifts. Toe splay changes on uneven slope. Stride shortens in shale, lengthens on packed duff. Pranksters forget they're imitating a body moving through a world and focus on the shape stamped in dirt. I've seen plywood feet, carved clogs, old movie mold replicas bought online. Once I found boot tread hidden under layered foam pads. Men will do absurd things for attention, and 600 comments. Next morning, I drove down out of my ridge in low cloud and met Deputy Harlan at the Larch Spur trailhead. He was 30, red-eyed from night shift, and eager in the way young deputies get when they think they're standing near folklore. He had 3 plaster casts set on a tailgate beside a thermos and 2 stale donuts. Morning, Mr. West. Bo. Bo, I took these yesterday before weather moved in. Originals are 50 yards up from station marker 14. We flagged the line. No one touched since. He said it like he was presenting evidence in court, and to his credit, he'd done cleaner work than most. I pulled on nitrile gloves, turned the first cast in my hands, and felt my skepticism slide half an inch to the left. The heel impression was broad, but not cartoon broad. Toes asymmetrical. Pressure ridge under the first metatarsal had a subtle roll, not a hard edge. Dermal ridging showed in 2 spots where fine silt had held detail before they poured plaster. Faint, but there. Midfoot showed a flex break that didn't match a rigid fake sole. Could still be fabricated, I muttered. Harlan leaned in. You seeing something? I'm seeing somebody understood anatomy or got lucky repeatedly. Second cast showed downhill travel. Stride compressed, lateral edge deeper where weight caught on slope. Third cast crossed mixed substrate, muck into shale, with stride length change that tracked natural gait adaptation, not fixed spacing from a stencil. Pranksters miss that. Even good ones miss it over distance. I set the cast down and rubbed my thumb across the bridge of my nose. Rain clouds were stacking over the western ridge like wet wool. Where exactly is the proposed road cut? He pointed northeast. Survey line starts lower basin, then switchbacks toward the saddle. Any photos beyond these 3? Dozens. You'll have them in the packet, but forecast says rain by dark, maybe sleet higher up. I looked at the tree line, then back at him. Then I go now. He blinked. Alone? I move faster alone. Sheriff wanted me to offer a second body. Second body talks. I need ears. He nodded, half relieved, half disappointed he wouldn't get a Bigfoot story to tell at dinner. I loaded my pack at the trailhead. Tarp, bivvy, stove, 2 days' rations, med kit, calipers, camera, flagging tape, notebook, sidearm I hope to never unholster, and enough cordage to solve most problems short of stupidity. I checked my watch, checked wind, and stepped onto the flagged path while there was still light to get above the first drainage choke. The forest swallowed road noise in 100 yards. Hiking in October rain country is less about strength than pace discipline. Push too hard early, you soak your base layers from inside and spend the night shivering. Move too slow, you run out of day and make bad camp decisions. I took the old army rhythm. 50 minutes on, 10 to read ground and bearings. Prints appeared where they should, soft shoulder near culvert, wet duff under salal, and disappeared where they shouldn't have held much at all, then reappeared offset with no obvious backtrack. Not impossible, just inconvenient. By mid-afternoon, I had enough measurements to know three things. 1. If this was a hoax, it was the best fieldcraft hoax I'd ever seen. 2. Whoever made it was moving with purpose, not putting on a show. 3. The sign line tracked uncomfortably close to the consortium's flagged survey corridor before veering into rougher basin, where no machine wanted to go. At a narrow wash, I found alder saplings snapped chest-high and peeled in spirals, fibers wet and fresh. Bear can strip bark, but the pattern here was controlled, almost twisted off by hand. Above that, huckleberry canes were broken at a height that made me set my palm up and squint. Too high for black bear feeding posture unless it climbed first. No claw marks nearby. I wrote unresolved in the notebook and hated the word. By then, sleet had started, soft, needle-fine, enough to turn exposed rock mean. I cut upslope to a stand of fir with decent windbreak and rigged a lean-to tarp low and tight. Fire would have been possible with effort. I chose no fire. Better ears, less signature. Dinner was jerky, nuts, and instant coffee that tasted like regret. As dark settled, I sat with my back to a root flare and listened to the forest sort itself. Drip line. Occasional branch release. A jay raising hell far downslope. Then, sometime near full dark, a sound like two fist-sized stones knocked together from across the basin. Clack, pause, clack, clack. Not random tumbling, deliberate intervals. A minute later, from a different angle upslope, another clack answered. I stayed still and waited for my own mind to invent explanations. Loose talus, thermal shift, deer kicking rock. Could be all of that. Could be none. Wind shifted and brought a faint, sour, musky scent. Animal, but not one I could name cleanly in the moment. I checked my watch. 1938. This was the part nobody writes in reports, when evidence sits in your lap and your training keeps saying slow down, while your gut starts tallying exits. The contract in my pocket said debunk. My notebook said uncertain. My bank account said fix the pump. My ridge said keep outsiders from turning this drainage into ruts and switchbacks. And somewhere under all that, the quiet part of me, the one that had learned to live with a dead woman's mug and empty rooms, said pay attention before you decide what story you're in. I lay down in boots, one arm through my pack strap, and listened until after midnight to heavy movement that never came close enough to challenge and never went far enough to ignore. By the time grey seeped into the tarp edge, I understood one thing plain. I had come to disprove a rumour. If the woods kept speaking like this, I might be asking to get out by sunrise. I was already moving before the light got honest. No stretching, no breakfast, no ritual. Just the practiced inventory. Fingers and toes warm, stove-packed, tarp unknotted, notebook dry, sidearm where it belonged, camera battery still green. I broke camp without standing fully upright, listening between motions. The basin held that muffled, after-storm quiet where every drip sounds too loud. My food hang was 30 yards off, slung from a branch crotch high enough to discourage black bear, and low enough I could reach with a throw line. The cord was still tied exactly as I'd left it. No fray, no chew, no drag marks in the duff below. When I lowered the bag, one zipper was open. Not ripped, open. I crouched and held still for a full 10 count before touching anything. Inside, my oatmeal packets were stacked, jerky untouched, coffee sleeves intact, peanut butter sachets where they should have been. Only one item was out of place, a protein bar unwrapped cleanly, wrapper flattened and set beside it like someone had read the instructions and complied. No teeth marks, no claw puncture. Just the bar, damp with mist, as if sampled and rejected. I stared at it longer than I care to admit. Then I saw the stones, 6 river-rounded rocks, each one palm-sized, laid in a narrow line on the moss beside my pack, angled not toward the route I'd planned into the lower basin, but east towards steeper timber and broken ground no survey crew would choose. Not a scatter, not chance, a line with intent. I set my hand above them and felt my pulse in my fingertips. Language, I said out loud before I could stop myself. The word fogged in front of me and vanished. I photographed everything with scale markers. Close, medium, context. Then I backed up and looked for approach sign. There were depressions beyond camp, wide and shallow on needle duff where weight had settled then lifted. Nothing clean enough for cast. Whoever had come in had done it in the dark, in wet timber, and had still moved quieter than a man my size should. I should have turned back right there, gone down to the truck, handed Dalton a folder full of weird and collected my partial pay. That was the prudent choice, the safe choice. The choice Lila would have argued for with one eyebrow up and both hands around that yellow mug. Instead, I checked wind and followed the stones. The east line climbed through mixed fir and alder into a pocket of alder blowdown, where root balls stood taller than a man, and ground travel turned into a 3-dimensional problem. Tracks showed in fragments. 1 partial heel in black mud, 2 toe impressions in a seep, then nothing over mats of sword fern and deadfall. I had to read secondary sign, broken lichen on a leaning snag, water shaken from salal at shoulder height, compressed moss on a log top where something heavy had balanced and stepped through. At 0820 I found hair, dark brown to black, coarse and long, caught on a splintered fir scar where bark had peeled off in a fresh strip. I put a tape to the snag and read 7 feet 10 to the lowest cluster, then 8-1 to the highest. Could have been transferred from branch contact. Could have been anything with enough height and luck. Could have been my imagination climbing the same ladder as fear. I bagged 3 strands with tweezers and wrote coordinates. 10 yards farther, I found blood. Not spray, smear. It marked the side of a mossed log in 3 parallel wipes, and then again on a flat stone like something had stepped, slipped, and corrected. The colour was still dark wet under the rain sheen, not yet turned brown. I touched a gloved finger to the edge. Tacky. Recent. I knelt and looked downhill for predator sign. Cougar drag. Coyote scat. Raven congregation. Nothing immediate. Then, in a shallow patch of saturated silt between roots, I caught the print pair that changed the problem from strange to specific. 1 large track, mid-foot pressure visible, direction east-northeast. Beside and slightly behind it, a smaller track following the same line. Not child small like a human toddler, more like adolescent relative to the larger maker. Same general morphology, less depth, shorter stride, irregular placement like it was favouring one side. I measured, photographed, measured again. The smaller line staggered on right step intervals. Left side took more load. Injured or exhausted. Family, I thought, and immediately corrected myself because that word carried assumptions I could not prove. But the pattern kept repeating. Larger print on outside, smaller on inside, as if shielded. When terrain narrowed, the larger set shifted behind for 3 strides, then resumed flank position once the corridor opened. That wasn't random movement. That was escort behaviour. Rain started back as a thin mist, enough to erase edge detail if I stood there thinking too long. I forced myself into procedure. Mark, record, move. Yet every 50 yards I caught myself stopping to listen, not for pursuit, but for decision. Rock clacks came once from high right at 0917, then not again. The sour, musky scent rolled in and out with the wind, stronger now, threaded with something metallic that matched the blood. I had spent years teaching younger men that panic is just a tension without discipline. Keep your loops tight. What do I know? What do I think? What do I need next? So I did that. I knew there were at least two makers, one likely injured. I thought they were moving away from something, not toward me. I needed visual confirmation before weather wiped this clean. The east line from the stones kept pulling me into rough country. At 10:05 I reached a narrow saddle where the forest opened just enough to show the lower basin to my left, the exact direction the flagged survey corridor would push if crews resumed. Through drizzle I could hear it faint and far. Chainsaws 2 ridges over, intermittent and tinny in damp air. They weren't in my pocket yet, but they were moving earlier than expected, maybe trying to get ahead of forecast. I swore into my sleeve and picked up pace. The ground dropped into a wind-throw pocket shaped like a broken bowl, choked with uprooted fir, snapped cedar trunks and pools of rainwater black as oil. Good hiding terrain, bad movement terrain. The kind of place injured animals hole up because predators have to commit to close quarters to follow. I slowed to half speed and started reading at eye level instead of feet. Fresh rub on a trunk. Branches bowed inward. A strip of bark peeled back with fibers still wet where a hand, if it was a hand, had gripped and pulled. Then a low vibration touched my sternum, so faint at first, I thought it was distant thunder. It came again, not heard so much as felt. A chest-deep rumble that carried through wood and wet ground. I froze behind a root wad and let my breathing settle until I could separate rain noise from everything else. The rumble came a third time, closer, followed by a short answering sound higher in pitch. Then silence. I eased forward 2 steps and stopped. They were there, 30 yards, maybe less, across a tangle of blown trunks. The larger one stood quarter-turned between me and a depression under an upended root plate. Dark coat, matted by rain. Shoulders broad enough to make the surrounding saplings look like switchgrass. Head low, not tucked, eyes fixed but not hard-locked the way a charge starts. One arm angled behind, slightly out, as if maintaining contact with whatever was in shelter. Then the smaller one shifted and I saw it. Half my height at the shoulder, maybe more, pressed against the root shelter with one leg held awkwardly. The right calf was slick with blood where fur had parted in a long tear. Not arterial pumping, thank God, but active ooze with each movement. Its breathing came fast, visible in quick chest pulses. Every story I had ever dismissed as campfire static tried to crowd into my skull at once. I pushed them out and went back to fundamentals. Distance, posture, exits, hands. The adult rumbled low again, not loud, not theatrical. A warning tone, maybe, but with restraint in it. It shifted 1 foot forward and stopped. I lowered my gaze to its chest, not eyes, and opened my hands away from my body to show they were empty. Slow, deliberate. Old patrol language for, I see you, I'm not rushing you. It mirrored me. I went still. It went still. I angled my shoulders sideways to cut threat profile. It eased its own stance, 1 fraction. I dropped my chin and looked down for 1 breath. It did not advance. Rain clicked on branches between us like tiny metronomes. There was nothing mythic in that moment. Nothing supernatural. Just 2 mammals doing math about risk. The juvenile made a small, rough exhale and tried to shift weight. The leg buckled. It caught itself against the root and gave a sound that landed somewhere between a cough and a suppressed cry. The adult's head snapped toward it, then back to me, and I understood with a clarity that felt like a physical blow. The tracks by the road weren't display. They were movement under pressure. Route changes, detours, fast decisions around pain. I heard chainsaws again, faint but real, and the whole map rearranged in my head. The prints near Larch Spur, the stone line by my camp, the high breaks in Huckleberry, the clacks across ridges, the blood smears, the smaller gate stutter. Not a monster patrolling territory. A guardian moving an injured young one through a corridor that kept getting narrower as humans pushed metal and rumour into it. I don't know how long we held there. Could have been 30 seconds. Could have been 5 minutes. Time in those moments loses all useful shape. I moved first, and only because stillness had become its own threat. Very slowly, I slid my pack off one shoulder and set it on a log in front of me, zipper side up, hands visible the whole time. The adult's chest rumble deepened, but it didn't close distance. I spoke in the same tone I'd use on a spooked horse. "Easy, I'm not here to chase you." My voice sounded small in the rain. I unzipped the med pouch 2 inches, paused, then opened it fully and took out gauze, vet wrap, and a bottle of sterile saline, placing each item on the log where they could be seen. No sudden reaches, no forward step. The adult watched my hands, then my face, then the supplies. It made a short huff, almost like a bark cut in half. I stopped moving. For 3 breaths, nothing changed. Then it shifted 1 step back toward the root shelter. Not retreat, not invitation, just enough that I could see the juvenile's leg more clearly through the branch lattice. The wound looked like a deep laceration along the gastrocnemius, likely from shale or sharp dead wood, edges ragged, contaminated with mud and fur. Bad, but survivable with pressure and immobilization if infection didn't take it. I knew what the contract wanted me to be in this forest. An answer key. Hoax or not hoax. Harmless curiosity or nuisance animal. Check a box, cash a check, go home. Standing there in rain with that adult between me and its wounded young, I stopped being interested in boxes. What I felt wasn't belief exactly. Belief belongs to churches and late-night podcasts. What I felt was recognition, the kind that comes when you catch your own habit in another body. Vigilance worn down to bone. Protect first, explain later. Keep the vulnerable moving one more ridge, one more night, one more bad weather front. I had lived 9 years like that after Lila died. Guard the quiet. Keep outsiders from stomping through what mattered. Eat, chop wood, carry water, repeat. The adult's eyes tracked me as if it had read the same manual. Another chainsaw whined in the distance, closer now, then cut out. Voices carried faintly on wind, human and careless. The juvenile flinched at the sound and tried to tuck deeper under the roots, scraping the torn leg. Fresh blood ran down to the ankle. Decision arrived all at once, simple and expensive. If I did my job as hired, crews would push this drainage harder by the week until every hidden pocket had flagging tape through it. If I did what the ground was asking me to do, I'd lose the contract. Maybe my standing with Dalton. Maybe more. The adult made that low chest rumble again, softer this time, and held position. I nodded once, more to myself than to it, and reached for the saline. I nodded once, more to myself than to it, and reached for the saline. Going to clean it, I said, because talking kept my movements honest. That's all. I tore the cap with my teeth, held the bottle where both of them could see it, and inched one knee forward onto a wet log. The juvenile bared its teeth. Not a full display, more pain than threat, and tried to pull the leg back. The adult rumbled once, low enough to buzz the wood between us. The smaller one froze. I squeezed saline in a thin stream over the wound. Mud and blood, washed down in pink ribbons. The cut was deeper than I'd guessed, a long flap on the outer calf, ragged and packed with grit. If it had hit tendon clean, the foot would have dropped. It still had partial flexion. Bad, not catastrophic. Yet. From downslope came a hard mechanical cough, then the sustained whine of a saw biting green wood. Closer. I swore under my breath and kept flushing. The adult's head turned toward the sound, then back to me. Decision ran through that body like current. Stay and guard, or move and risk the leg. It chose stay, for now. My shoulder mic crackled to life. "Bo, this is Dalton. You copy?" I let it hiss for 2 beats and thumbed transmit. "Copy." "You online with those prints?" "Affirm." "Consortium lead says one of his cutters found fresh sign and wants to advance to Station 22 before weather closes. I told him hold until your read." Another saw started. "Not holding." "They're not holding," I said. "Static?" Then Dalton's sigh. "Yeah, I'm hearing that argument in real time. How bad is terrain where you are?" I watched the juvenile tremble under my hand. The truth came easy. The useful truth took work. "Unstable blowdown," I said. "Hidden voids. Injury risk high. Tell them back off 1 ridge minimum." I released transmit and reached for gauze. Behind me, voices floated through rain. Human, excited. Too loud for timber this tight. The kind of voices men use when they think the woods are a backdrop instead of a system. A sharp metallic pop cracked from the basin floor. Bear banger. Someone trying to clear brush of wildlife. The juvenile jolted and slammed its wounded leg against rootwood. Blood welled bright again. The adult snapped upright, chest expanding, and for 1 second I thought it was coming through me to get downslope. It didn't. It held. I pressed gauze to the laceration and felt heat through my glove. "Stay," I said. To it or me, I couldn't tell. The radio spit another voice. Not Dalton. Male, impatient, local radio net on open scan. "Unit 3 to Sheriff, we got probable large animal sign, maybe aggressive bear. We're deploying deterrence and continuing line cut." I hit transmit before Dalton could answer. "Unit 3, this is West. Stop deploying anything explosive. You're in deadfall over hollow route channels. You start a panic in there, you'll have injured personnel." "Copy, Mr. West," the man said with all the respect of a smirk. "We're fine." Fine. That one word told me everything. They weren't treating this as safety anymore, they were treating it as schedule. If they punched the spur through this drainage, my ridge would get what every ridge gets. Engines at dawn, cans in the creek, strangers with GPS and no judgment, and, eventually, gates that never stay shut. The basin would lose its quiet geometry. Whatever lived here would be pushed into thinner cover until somebody got a photo, then a bounty mentality, then a circus. And me? I'd be the old tracker whose name sat on page 2 of the report that made it possible. I folded fresh gauze and wrapped as tight as I dared. The juvenile snapped at the air near my wrist but didn't strike. The adult watched every turn of my hand. "Dalton," I said into the mic, voice flat. "You need authority on that crew now." "I'm trying. Consortium Council says contract gives them access unless immediate life hazard is documented by county personnel." I stared at the blood on my glove. "Then document this. Immediate life hazard." Before he could reply, another bear banger detonated, much closer, followed by a yell and brush, thrashing downslope. The adult's rumble became a sound I felt in my molars. Everything failed at once. The juvenile ripped its leg free and lurched sideways, half climbing, half falling over a slick cedar trunk. My wrap came loose in my hand like wet ribbon. The adult whirled toward the noise, gave one explosive bark, and vanished through the windthrow with impossible speed for something that size. Then men shouted, "Movement! Up there! Jesus, did you see that?" Don't shoot, don't shoot. A gunshot cracked anyway. Not a warning pop. Rifle crack high and flat, echoing off wet timber. I dropped behind a root plate on instinct. Wood chips sprayed past my cheek. Somewhere beyond the log maze, a roar rolled through the basin. Not theatrical, not movie monster, just raw force and fury. Another shout followed, abruptly cut off into a choking grunt. I crawled toward my pack, grabbing what I could. Vet wrap, paracord, one splint roll. My camera case slid off the log and disappeared into black water between roots. I lunged for it, missed, and felt cold surge up my sleeve to the elbow. When I got the case back, the lens was spiderwebbed and the body dead. Water in the battery well. Proof gone. A cutter in orange hard hat appeared 10 yards below, eyes white, sword dangling dead in one hand. "Hey, hey, there's something up here!" "Back out," I barked. "Back the hell out now." He took one step up anyway, and his boot punched through rotten matting to the thigh. He screamed and dropped the saw. The machine bounced, chainbrake off, and chewed wild against a root before stalling. He clawed at mud, stuck fast in a hidden void. I slid down, got both hands under his harness straps, and hauled while he kicked. My left ankle twisted under a submerged branch and lit up hot, clear pain. We got him free in one sucking rush that left his boot behind. From uphill came crashing movement and that same chest-deep roar, closer now with a sharp staccato cry layered under it, the juvenile, moving, terrified. The cutter sobbed once and clamped his mouth shut. "Can you stand?" I asked. He nodded too fast. "Then move. Downridge. No heroics." He staggered off, one socked foot slapping mud, and I tried my radio. Nothing. I smacked the handset, checked the cable, ripped clean where I must have snagged it in the scramble. Hand mic dead, backup antenna bent. I still had a GPS and my watch, and one good leg plus one questionable. Comms were gone. I crouched there in rain with a broken camera, a dead radio, and blood on both gloves that wasn't all mine. The plan I'd had, calm, treat, assess, report, was gone with the first shot. I could not fix that in 5 minutes or with better gear. Men had seen enough to get stupid and maybe enough to get obsessed. For the first time all morning, doubt hit me clean. Not fear of the animals. Fear of failing everybody at once. Fail Dalton because I couldn't give him clean evidence or command the crew. Fail the injured young one because I hadn't secured the wrap before the panic. Fail my own ridge because one incident report with words like aggressive unknown would bring more boots than any rumour ever had. Rain ran off my hat brim into my mouth, metallic with adrenaline. I sat back against wet wood, breathing hard, and my hand found the inner pocket of my medkit by habit. There was a folded paper there, sealed in tape, edges soft from years of being carried and never used. Lila's hospice letter. I hadn't read it in over a year. My fingers opened it anyway. Her handwriting leaned right, neat until the second page where pain meds had made the lines drift. I read in rain while the basin held its breath between shouts. Bo. If you're reading this, I probably did not get to say things in the right order. I know you like order. I do too. Cancer does not care. I'm not brave all the time. People keep calling me brave and I nod because it makes them feel useful. But the truth is, I am scared at 3 a.m. when you're asleep in the chair and I can hear you pretending not to cry. I'm scared of leaving you alone with your competence. You are very good at surviving and very bad at needing. Please do not make a shrine out of silence. Please do not turn our life into a museum where nothing gets touched. Keep chopping wood, yes. Keep your lists, yes. But let something surprise you at least once in a while, even if it is inconvenient and muddy and doesn't fit your categories. I feel guilty that I am relieved on the days pain medicine works because it means I drift and you have to do everything. I know you hate helplessness. I do too. Still, there it is. I need help. I needed it before this, and I didn't always ask. If there is one thing I want for you, it is not move on. I hate that phrase. I want you to stay reachable. By people, by weather, by whatever wild thing still asks you to pay attention. Love is not a promise to fix. It is a promise to witness. L. The rain blurred the last line until the ink feathered. I held the page under my jacket and laughed once, sharp and ugly. Inconvenient and muddy and doesn't fit your categories. Yeah, I said to nobody. Heard. I folded the letter, slid it back into tape, and for the first time since the shot, I felt my hands steady. Not calm, steady. From uphill, a low knock sounded, wood on wood, single strike. Then another, farther east, not random, a signal, move. I limped upslope, following broken fern and dark smears where the juvenile's leg had brushed trunks. The adult stayed out of sight, but never far. I caught movement at the edge of vision, a shoulder slipping between firs, then gone. Once, when I stumbled, it stopped ahead and waited just long enough for me to regain balance before it ghosted on. At 11:35, my backup radio, old FRS clipped to pack strap, caught a fragment from Downridge Crew Channel. Sending in wildlife response. Repeat, ODFW en route with tranquilizer team. Hold perimeter. Another voice cut in, likely consortium foreman, and get media contained. Nobody posts anything. That was the final move. Not retreat, not caution. Escalation with bureaucracy, perimeter, response team, sedation, documentation, then institutional momentum grinding everything in its path. Once officials framed this as an animal control incident, the drainage would be swarmed by uniforms, biologists, deputies, maybe federal folks if someone said undiscovered species out loud. Road closure would become a chess piece, not a safeguard. The family would be tracked by professionals with better gear than mine and fewer reasons to look away. I crested a narrow bench and saw why the adult had pushed east. A chute of unstable scree dropped into a ravine, choked with alder. Dangerous, ugly, and nearly impassable for crews with equipment. Good escape route if you knew the safe seams. Death trap if you rushed. The juvenile stood at the chute edge, shaking, legs slick red beneath the ruined wrap. It tried one step down slope and stones rolled out from under it. It cried out and collapsed hard onto its haunches. The adult turned on me then, fully visible at 15 yards, rain running off old scars that webbed its chest. It struck a dead snag once, crack, and held my gaze. Not threat, not plea, a demand to choose. Behind us, far too close now, came the grind of engines and men calling bearings to each other. I looked at the chute, at the wound, at my useless primary radio, at the sky lowering toward more weather. If I tried to splint here under pressure and failed, we all got boxed. If I ran now, response teams would net the basin before dark. Somewhere downslope, a siren yelped once and cut. I took a breath that hurt my ankle and reached for paracord. Then voices broke through the trees less than 100 yards back. West! Sheriff's office! Call out! I did not know whose side that voice was on anymore, and the juvenile was bleeding faster. West! Sheriff's office! Call out! The voice came again, closer, male, breathy from climbing. Brush snapped downhill. Somebody else cursed. I looked once at the juvenile, blood running in a thin sheet down the ankle fur, then at the adult standing over me like a storm front with eyes. 2 minutes, I told it, as if it understood English and bargains. Maybe it understood tone. It didn't move. I cut 2 green alder switches with my folding saw, quick and clean. Then knelt. Easy, I murmured to the juvenile, hands out where it could track them. Leg, hold still. It bared teeth and made that rough, panicked cough. The adult rumbled low enough to shake my kneecaps. The juvenile froze long enough for me to slide one splint along each side of the calf. Gauze, pressure wrap, paracord tie above and below the wound, not tight enough to choke circulation. I checked the foot, warm, responsive. Good enough to move, I whispered. Not good, good enough. Bo, a deputy shouted now. Answer me. Up here, I barked back, and nobody takes another step. Silence. Then Dana's voice, the foreman, flat and hard. We've got an injured cutter and an active threat animal. We are not backing off. You take 3 more steps, I shouted. You'll have 3 injured cutters. You're standing on a rotten mat over voids. Then come down and brief us. No, you come up and you die stupid. I heard boots shift in wet brush, men arguing in tight, angry whispers. The adult turned its head toward the voices, body coiling. If it charged now, this whole drainage would become a war zone by dark. I rose slowly and stepped between it and the sound. Stay, I said without looking back. Then I limped 5 yards down slope to where they could see me through fir trunks. A deputy in county green, 2 cutters in orange, and Mick Danner with a rifle held low like he was pretending that counted as safe. The deputy's eyes flicked past me uphill and widened. Bo, what is... Don't say it, I snapped. Danner lifted his chin. You're obstructing a contracted operation. Move aside. You fired in unstable timber and blasted deterrents into a blind pocket, I said. You nearly killed your own man. You're done. He gave me a thin smile. County can sort liability later. Right now, I've got blood trail, prints, and witnesses. We secure the site. Secure it how? With that? I nodded at his rifle. You think ODFW tranquilizer team can thread darts through blowdown in sleet? He didn't blink. I think we can't let a dangerous animal walk. Behind me, the adult made one short, explosive bark. The deputy flinched so hard he almost dropped his radio. Danner's men raised their hands to shoulder straps, not weapons, but their bodies screamed flight. Danner alone leaned forward. There, he said softly, eyes bright in a way I didn't trust. That's what this is. You found it and now you want to play mountain god. I took one breath and changed tactics. Deputy, I said, give me your radio. He hesitated half a second, then handed it over. Danner stepped toward him. Deputy, do not... I cut across. Dalton, this is West on a deputy unit. Priority traffic. Static crackled, then go. Immediate closure recommendation for Black Elk East Basin grid, 7 Bravo through 9 Charlie. Active ground failure risk, concealed route voids, unstable scree chute, 1 worker already entrapped and injured. Repeat. Immediate life hazard. I need all crews withdrawn 2 ridges minimum pending geo review. Danner lunged for the handset. I shifted old reflex, and he grabbed air. Dalton came back sharper. Copy all. Units in field stand by for shutdown order. Danner shouted toward the radio. Sheriff, this is Consortium Lead. West is compromised. We have aggressive unknown wildlife and probable attack. Negative, I said into the mic, steady as I could make it. No confirmed predatory contact. Worker injury from terrain collapse. Additional hazard, fresh cougar kill sign in lower draw, and blood attractant throughout. This area is a stack of bad decisions. All true. Dalton's pause was short and heavy. He knew exactly what I was doing and exactly why I'd chosen words that would hold in court. Then, all units, Sheriff's command, disengage and withdraw to Larch Spur trailhead. No further advance. I'm issuing temporary emergency closure under County Safety Authority pending geological assessment. Danner stared at me like I'd stolen his truck. You can't, he said, to no one and everyone. You can't shut federal timber access on hearsay. Dalton answered him directly over the open channel. I just did under immediate risk protocol. You can challenge it Monday with counsel. Monday. Out here, Monday might as well be another planet. Dana took one step uphill anyway, jaw working. I am not leaving this ridge because an old tracker got spooked by noises. I pointed my trekking pole at the slope 10 yards to his right. See that moss plate? He glanced. Watch. I jabbed the pole tip into a seam beneath it and levered. The whole section sheared off like wet cake, taking 2 young firs and a sheet of stones with it. The ground dropped 3 feet into black emptiness before collapsing farther downslope in a grinding slide. One of Dana's cutters yelped and scrambled back on all fours. Dana finally lost colour. That was a small one, I said. You want to test a big one with 6 men and machines? The deputy swallowed and keyed his shoulder mic. All county personnel confirm withdraw. That's an order. Boots began retreating, fast now, brush cracking away downslope. One cutter crossed himself as he went. Dana stayed 3 seconds longer, eyes still on me, hate and calculation wrestling behind them. This isn't over, he said. It is for today. He backed off at last, then turned and vanished with the others. I listened until their noise thinned to rain and distance. When I turned back, the adult was still there, chest heaving, but its stance had changed. Less coil, more watch. I gave the deputy's radio one last transmission. Dalton, I'm proceeding east to assess scree edge and egress options. I'll report from high ground. Bow, Dalton said, voice lower now, private even on open net. You good? No, I said, but I'm moving. I clipped the radio to my pack and went back to the juvenile. Getting them off that bench took the next 6 hours and every trick I had. The juvenile could hobble if the adult paced it and if we kept angles gentle. Steep downslopes made it shake and stumble. Twice we had to stop while it leaned against deadfall and breathed in ragged, whistling bursts. I refreshed the wrap once with the last of my gauze and used my belt as a temporary sling around its hip to keep load off the torn calf through a bad section. The adult never touched me, never let me out of sight, and never once gave me a free mistake. If I moved too fast toward the juvenile, it blocked. If I paused too long listening downslope, it knocked a branch once like a warning to keep pace. Not command, coordination. By late afternoon, we reached the head of the scree field I'd chosen on the map years ago as a place no sane crew would route equipment. Sharp shale, unstable base, constant minor movement after rain. Perfect deterrent. I set my pack down and started the lie. First, I found 3 good large impressions already in wet grit where the adult had stepped. I photographed and measured with scale. Then I used a cut slab of bark strapped under my boot to broaden my own tracks, matching depth patterns where possible and breaking rhythm every few strides so it looked natural on unstable substrate. Crude up close, convincing at 20 feet in drizzle. I dragged a fir bough in intermittent sweeps to mimic body brush and panic movement, then stamped deeper landing points at rock edges to suggest heavy weight, bounding downslope into impossible footing. Toward the chute's center, I let the false line converge with real slide cracks and fresh fall scars, where no one with 2 brain cells would continue. At one point, the adult watched me from 15 yards, head tilted, as if deciding whether this was lunacy or assistance. Helping, I muttered, in my species' stupid dialect. When the false trail was set, I circled wide and scrubbed my own return sign over slick stone and fallen logs. The juvenile and adult took a hidden alder seam east I'd scouted years ago while hunting elk, tight, wet, and invisible unless you knew where to look. At dusk, I climbed to a knoll with line of sight to town repeater and borrowed the deputy radio again. Dalton, west. I have coordinates for active scree instability, slide cracks, and unsafe wildlife attractant conditions. Sending grid now. Recommend closure extension entire East Basin and spur approaches. Send. I read off the points, then uploaded what photos survived my busted camera plus phone backups. Collapsed root channels, slide scar, blood on logs, cutter entrapment hole, cougar scat by lower draw I'd photographed on my way out. All true, all sufficient, none complete. Dalton was quiet when I finished. Consortium is already threatening injunction. Then make them threaten it on paper. You naming the animal? No. Calling it hoax? No. A long breath over static. Copy. Night hit before I cleared the basin. I bivvied cold under spruce, ankle swelling to grapefruit size, and woke before dawn to a single knock on dead wood somewhere uphill. One knock. I crawled out, breath smoking, and saw them across a strip of silver fog. The adult standing broadside on a rise, old scar web bright with frost. The juvenile behind it, weight still uneven but upright. The adult struck a dead snag once with its palm. Tuck, then turned uphill. It went 10 yards, looked back, and waited until the juvenile made the grade. Then both slipped into fir shadow and were gone. By mid-morning, I limped into Larch Spur trailhead, looking like I'd been dragged behind my own truck. A deputy met me at the gate with black coffee and an expression somewhere between awe and worry. "You look awful," he said. "I feel expensive." He almost smiled, then sobered. "Dana filed complaint before sunrise. Says you interfered with operations and fabricated hazard data." "Good, means he knows the closure hurt." Dalton came out of his rig carrying a folder fat with forms. He studied my face, my ankle, the dried blood on my cuffs. "Walk me through everything," he said. We sat on tailgates in the drizzle for 2 hours while I gave him chronology down to minute marks. First contact, worker entrapment, gunshot source direction, slope failure demo, evacuation order, coordinates, terrain photos, injury observations. I did not say Bigfoot. I did not say ape. I said large unidentified bipedal track maker, accompanied by smaller individual, movement consistent with injury evacuation behavior. Dalton wrote it all. When I finished, he closed the folder and looked toward the ridge. "You know this report ends your contract," he said. "Figured. Consortium will call you compromised." "Been called worse," he nodded once. "Closure stands for now. State geotech team goes in tomorrow with county escort. No cutting, no heavy equipment. If they confirm what you sent, I can lock it for the season. If they don't," he held my gaze, "then we keep fighting with what we have." Dana chose that moment to stride over from his truck in a clean rain shell, lawyer on speakerphone from his dashboard, anger polished into corporate diction. "Sheriff, my clients demand immediate access restoration. This closure is pretext built on unverifiable folklore and one contractor's misconduct." Dalton didn't turn. "You fired a rifle in active work zone without clear target." Dana spread his hands. "Warning shot." A deputy, to his credit, spoke up. "I heard one report, no warning call." Dana ignored him and jabbed a finger at me. "He manipulated tracks. He admitted as much to my crew." I met his stare. "I manipulated your men into leaving unstable ground before it buried them." He stepped close enough I could smell mint gum and diesel. "You think you're protector of this mountain? You're a retired nobody with a savior complex." I leaned on my cane and kept my voice even. "Maybe. Still alive, though." His mouth twitched. "You'll be deposed." "Bring a map." Dalton finally faced him. "Mr. Dana, you are now formally notified of temporary closure area and evidence preservation order. Any unauthorized entry will be cited criminal trespass under County Emergency Authority. Dana laughed once, sharp. Emergency Authority over a ghost story. Incredible. Then he got in his truck and left too fast, spraying gravel. He did not fold easy. He filed motions, sent letters, and fed local radio a line about anti-logging hysteria led by grief-addled retirees. For 3 days, my voicemail filled with strangers calling me liar, hero, coward, saint, fraud. I deleted them all. On day 4, the geotech report came back. Active slump complex, saturated root plate failure, high probability debris movement through proposed spur corridor. Recommendation: no road construction pending multi-year stabilization study. Dalton drove up to my cabin himself with the paperwork. He handed me the packet, then a separate envelope. Consortium terminated your contract for breach of scope. I opened the second envelope. Final partial payment, less than promised, enough that my jaw tightened. Dalton watched me read. I fought for full amount. I know. He looked around the porch at stacked cedar, at Lila's mug upside down by the sink window. For what it's worth, he said, you were right. About what? About attention. He left after 1 cup of coffee and no small talk. The next morning, I drove to town, bought a new well pump and paid cash. That night, after the pump was in and primed and the house lines stopped coughing air, I sat at my kitchen table with Lila's letter, my busted camera, and the yellow mug full of reheated coffee. Rain ticked on the roof in soft bursts. The cabin smelled like wet wool and solder flux. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept things I wasn't ready to throw away. Her scarf, a stack of grocery lists in her round handwriting, and an old flip phone wrapped in a dish towel. Dead battery for years. I'd kept meaning to charge it. Never had. I found the charger in a box of tangled cords, plugged it in, waited through a minute of blank screen, and then a shaky startup tone that hit me in the chest, harder than any roar in the basin. 3 saved voicemails. 2 from doctors' offices. 1 from Lila, date stamped 11 days before she died. I pressed play. Her voice came thin and breathy, smiling anyway. Bo, hey, you went to get ice and probably forgot your phone in the truck. So this is me leaving a message for the man in the next room, which feels ridiculous. A soft laugh, then a pause where I could hear hospital beeps. I just wanted to say, if I get cranky later, it's pain, not you. You are doing everything right, and I love you very much, and I'm scared, and I don't want to pretend I'm not. Okay, come back with the good ice, not the tiny cubes. I sat very still until the message ended and replayed to menu. Then I said into the empty room, I was scared too. My own voice sounded like gravel. I hit play again, listened through, and answered her out loud this time like she'd just stepped into the kitchen. You were right about me in silence, I said. I made a museum, charged admission to no one. I wiped my face with the heel of my hand and laughed once. Also, for the record, I bought the good ice. You never gave me credit. On the 3rd playthrough, I didn't talk. I just listened to her breathe between words and let it be what it was. Not a haunting, not closure, just contact. When it ended, I set the phone beside the mug and said, clear as I could, I can't fix what happened. I can witness what's here. The room stayed a room. The rain stayed rain. But the silence changed shape. Less like absence, more like space. I slept without waking to every branch scrape for the first time in months. First hard freeze came a week later. I was on the porch at dawn, splitting kindling by starlight, when headlights climbed the track. A county rig rolled to a stop, dropped off 2 paper sacks from the hardware counter, and a parts invoice I'd already cleared, then headed back down without idling long enough for conversation. I carried the sacks inside and set them by the stove. We drank coffee from mismatched mugs while steam fogged the kitchen window, me and the quiet. That evening, Dalton called to say the county commissioners voted unanimous to maintain closure through winter, citing geotech and watershed concerns. Consortium appealed. Appeal denied pending spring review. Public reason is slope instability, he said. Public reason is true. He chuckled. You always were good at writing sentences that carried two loads. After dark, I carried Lila's mug to the porch rail, binoculars around my neck, and scanned the opposite ridge where firs stood black against a fading cobalt sky. At first, nothing but wind movement. Then, just before full dark, a tall shape detached from a trunk line on the far slope. Still, vertical. There for maybe 4 breaths. I raised the binoculars, adjusted focus, and by the time glass found the spot, the shape had stepped back into timber. No drama, no roar, just presence, then privacy. I lowered the binoculars and sat on the rail, mug warm in both hands. My mornings still start before light. First axe bite, rabbit line, spring cans, coffee on the porch. The life is practical, same as ever. But there is one more task now at dusk. I look across the drainage and pay attention to what does not belong to me. The ridge is quieter with the spur closed. Creek runs clear after storms. Elk moved through 2 days ago in a line of 9, cows and late calves unhurried. No engine noise from East Basin, no fresh flagging tape. I don't know what story the world will tell about black elk. Folks like categories: hoax, monster, liability, miracle. Out here, it's simpler. There was a wound, there was pressure, there was a choice. By winter, I no longer wanted out of the forest by sunrise. I wanted the forest left whole enough that both of us could stay.